Bio students, today we're going to talk about animal characteristics. So we're going to start our introduction into the animal unit. So first, how do you distinguish what an animal really is? There's a great diversity in the animal community, and animals can be distinguished by a set of characteristics. So if you think of an animal, you think of so many different kinds. Like even the ones that are posted there, there's a wide variety of characteristics. And many of those characteristics actually fit into different organisms around the world, but actually aren't labeled as an animal. So we have a set of characteristics, and I'll go through those with you about what makes an animal an animal. First is H, I want you to think of heterotroph. Heterotrophs, they obtain nutrients and energy by eating other organisms. If you remember, an autotroph creates their own energy and creates their own ways in order to live and survive. Whereas a heterotroph, like we are heterotrophs, us as humans, we need to get our energy and our nutrients from other organisms. We need to eat other things. So the grass obviously is an autotroph. It creates its own energy. Whereas the zebra and the lion, they are called, did I say a plant is an autotroph, and a zebra and a lion are heterotrophs. Next is E. E, I want you to think of eukaryotic cells. Those organisms, there we go. Ooh. Here we go. Those organisms are cells that have a nucleus enclosed within their membranes. So eukaryotic cells are different than prokaryotic cells. There's a eukaryote cell, there's a prokaryote cell. Next, the next letter is L. This lacks a cell wall. So just looking at a cell, when you are a bio student in one of our classes and you look at a cell in a microscope, you notice that it doesn't have a cell wall. You can tell this. This is where algae, fungi, and plants go. They have a cell wall. The next letter is M. M, I want you to think of multicellular. Their bodies are composed of many, many, many cells, right? We are multicellular. My dog is probably going to bark is multicellular. Their body are composed of many, many, many cells. Something that's single-celled, that isn't an animal. That isn't considered an animal. I also want you to also think about movement. Animals move. In most cases, animals move. So, I have a picture that goes with that. So, multicellular. Think about all of our little friends, not in our distance stuff now when we have to be 3 to 6 feet away from each other, but multicellular. So next is this snail. Now we're going to go through those letters, H, E, L, M. Snail. Is it heterotroph or autotroph? It is actually heterotroph. It doesn't make its own energy. It's eukaryotic. It lacks a cell wall, and it's multicellular. What does that say about a snail? It's an animal. Okay, now a little trickier one. A monkey orchid. Aren't those adorable? I think those are really cool. I should try to see if I can grow some. I don't know. So, a monkey orchid. So, are they heterotroph? They're actually plants. So, they're going to be autotrophic. So, they aren't going to be considered an animal. So, they don't fit into the first category. So, they're not animals. Sea urchins. Yes, they're heterotrophic. They're eukaryotic. They lack a cell membrane, and they are multicellular. So is a sea urchin an animal? Yes, it is. There's some lady, right? Some cool pop lady. I don't know. They're an animal, right? Just like us, humans. We're animals. We're heterotrophic, eukaryotic, lacks a cell membrane, lacks a cell wall, multicellular, and we move. Stentor. So that is, it's actually unicellular. It's only one cell. That's one cell. It's the largest cell, but it is unicellular. So it is not considered an animal. Moving on. Sea sponge. So a sea sponge, they are actually animals. The catch, though, is they don't really move, do they? But they are heterotrophic, eukaryotic lacks a cell wall, and they are multicellular. So sea sponges are alive. Next, Venus flytrap, tricky one. I'm tricking you on these plants here. The key word, what am I saying? Plants. Are plants animals? They're autotrophs. Yes, this Venus flytrap, he's going to grab a fly and he's going to eat it, right? But they also create their own energy and their own nutrients from the sun. And so that makes them autotrophs. And so is this Venus flytrap an animal? No. Mushrooms. Are they animals? They have a cell wall. So they are the same as plants. They are not animals. Next is this beetle. It's heterotrophic, eukaryotic, lacks a cell wall, multicellular, and it moves. It's an animal. Next is this octopus. I think that's pretty obvious. Heterotroph, eukaryotic, lacks a cell wall, multicellular. It's considered an animal. Coral. Who knows about coral? Well, coral, they don't make their own food. So are they considered a plant? They're actually an animal. Next is a botfly larva. Gross picture, right? So they're also considered animals. They're an insect, so they're an animal. Heterotrophic, eukaryotic, lacks a cell wall, multicellular, and movement. How about this? Virus. What's the tricky part about viruses? Do you remember? They're neither heterotrophic or... Hey, so this is a virus. So viruses are not eukaryotic or prokaryotic. They are not heterotroph or autotroph. So what makes them? They're not animals. So what have you learned? Heterotroph, eukaryotic, lacks a cell wall, multicellular / movement. What is that about? I want you to think about that every time you think of the characteristics of an animal. And there is a funny picture of Mr. Helm to help you remember your characteristics of animals. So now we're going to go into the types of animals. We talked about the different, what makes an animal. Now let's talk about the different types of animals. Since there's such a wide variety of animals, we can go into that. Animals are so different that we need to differentiate them into two different categories. And those categories are called invertebrates or chordates. We probably already knew that from some of our elementary learning. But as you can see in this picture, there's, like in the earlier slide, there's a huge distinguished characteristics between these. From the insects to this really cute little hedgehog and the sunflowers. And so we are going to go into what makes them a little bit different. And here we go. So next is invertebrates. So when you think of invertebrates, I want you to think that they're animals that lack a backbone or a vertebral column. And if you didn't know, invertebrates actually make up 95% of all the species in the entire world. So when you think of animals, you probably only think of animals that have a backbone. That's like personally what I think. But invertebrates are actually the largest category and column in the animals. They make up 95%. Invertebrates include sea stars, worms, jellyfish, insects, and they range in size from dust mites to squids. Now we're going to talk about chordates and what makes up a chordate. They have 4 distinguished characteristics. I'm trying to get it to come up. So those 4 distinguished characteristics, they have at least during one stage of their life. This is a dorsal nerve cord, hollow nerve cord. They have a notochord. They have a post-anal tail and pharyngeal pouches. So a dorsal nerve cord is something that runs along the dorsal or the back side of your body. This is where nerves branch out from this cord at intervals. We can think of that as like our nervous system. This is what develops into our nerves, right? We're going to go into nervous systems in a couple of units. We'll talk about the nervous system. So here is the dorsal nerve cord. Next is the notochord. It is a long supporting rod that runs through the body just below the nerve cord. In vertebrates, the notochord is present during embryonic development. This is where it includes the development of developing during the embryonic body. It is replaced by the vertebrae column in the spine in most vertebrates. Most chordates have it when they are embryos. There's a little embryo for you. Next is the tail, the postanal tail. They have a tail that extends beyond the anus. The tail continues and contains skeletal elements and muscles. Next is the pharyngeal pouches, also called the pharynx. And the pharyngeal pouches are actually slits and openings into the pharynx. Organisms that live in aquatic environments, they allow the exit of water that enters through the mouth during feeding. Think of fish, right? They have gills that allow them to breathe. Some invertebrate columns use the slits to filter food in and out of their mouth. This would be like I said, fish. So during the terrestrial animals, so terrestrial meaning not in the water, land living plants include mammals and birds. Our pharyngeal slits and pouches are present during embryonic development. And these develop into the jaw and actually into the inner ear. So this is my last slide. There is questions throughout and a quiz about it. Let me know if you have any questions. Please email us. We are going to continue on. This is just day one in our little slight introduction. We'll continue on into animals and characteristics of animals later on. Happy learning.